Like Leeds agreed that deferral during the week, and Karen Brady's coming out today saying, the West Ham board member, that they're looking at July to hold matches. There's a lot of legal and ethical, I would say, issues now around getting sport back on track. Like West Ham players today being self-isolating because they're testing positive. And I think the prospect of making just the seasons null and void is not going to provoke as much rancor as it might have a few weeks ago, with the way this has moved so fast and so seriously.
I don't know though, John. I mean, with all due respect, you cannot declare the season null and void. Like, and I'm thinking 100% of Liverpool fans here. I mean, you just cannot do this to Liverpool fan. They've waited all this time. They've absolutely coasted to the league. They're going to get a record points tally. The league is over. You couldn't have a bet on them at 1,000 to 1 on that they're going to win the league. Surely not. I mean, I know I've read stories this week about clubs are worried about the ethical kind of optics of all of this, and football is clearly quite irrelevant. But people need to remember this virus is going to subside in a year or two's time. Life will have completely moved on. We'll be debating local derbies. All this will move on. I would 100% hope that there's like the situation in Ireland where we have an abridged season, where the normal winter leagues, that next season is going to be a shorter season or something like that. But from the English league's perspective, for me, it's totally out of the question that you wouldn't complete the seasons. If that's at the cost of subsequent seasons, fine. But you can't declare the Premier League this season null and void, because otherwise, I don't think Liverpool fans will ever want to watch football again.
Yeah, but Johnny, it's a tough one. You see, like I do basically agree with your sentiment, and I think anything that should be done to any aspiration to finish the season is, I think it's a noble one. It is the right thing to do. But you are getting to the stage now where they are voiding non-league, they're voiding ladders within women's football, and there comes a stage where there needs to be some kind of collective policy across the board. And okay, Liverpool are clear cut, so that makes it even more straightforward. But I mean, you have relegation places and other positions, prize money. There's massive complications. I'm not saying you don't know what they are. I think we all know what the complications are. But I just think that you say, well, let's just make next year shortened. But the Premier League relies on massive TV money, generated by X amount of games, X amount of, the season being this length or that length or whatever it might be. And yeah, in theory, say, we should finish this season at the expense of subsequent seasons. That sounds fine in theory, but in practice, that could prove to be more complicated. Now, I'm not advocating voiding. I think that, as with all these things, there's going to be people with their club preference. I don't have any graw for any English club, so I have no stake in the game here. I think it should, they should attempt to endeavour to finish the season. But you do get to the stage where if this goes on till September, the argument for starting another season again, it does become stronger. And yeah, a grievance would linger. But then again, relegation, Leicester, aren't in the Champions League, who having earned that. There's going to be hard luck stories. But
when you say going on to September, what do you mean there?
I mean that their next game of football that you can't play, say, in a winter league in England, is September. So do you say that you return and you play 9 games then you have to have a break of pre-season before you start your next season. Now, I mean, the point has been made, and I think we spoke about it here pretty early doors, you do have that Winter World Cup in 2022.
Yeah.
And you could, there is an argument to be made.
That's the stupid Qatar World Cup.
Yeah, which is so stupid, but could end up being somewhat useful. But I just think, I know that, when someone calls for it to be voided, everyone's instantly jumping on them going, well, this is typical. You're engaged in some conspiracy against, X, Y, or Z.
No, I don't think that's the case. I think this is a case about public health here. And that's at this stage, now, this has moved so quickly. This is about public health and a very unprecedented world pandemic.
Oh, I agree with you, John.
And therefore, that has to be the priority here.
John, there are 29 games gone in the season. It's not like there are 12 games gone.
I know that, but I think that it's just a case of we just don't know. And at the moment when we just don't know, if it did become null and void for the fact that they just couldn't play it, it would just have to be the case.
They're going to have to change all the and FIFA. FIFA. I don't envy FIFA. In fact, I don't envy any decision maker on this because it's really difficult. Like it is, and like people are going to lose their minds probably over aspects of this, and yet they shouldn't because, as you're right, John, it's a public health, emergency, and everything is secondary to that. But sport is a distraction for people, and they need a distraction, and that's always going to be the way that it functions. I don't envy them because, like, you have contracts that are up, in June the 30th. They're looking at, force majeure to extend those contracts, but there's people could take legal cases here based on if they wanted to be particularly strong about it. Like if you're a club that gets relegated, for a season that resumes 6 months afterwards, and you're affected by some circumstances or events, I can just see it getting messy in every scenario. And I know we always refer to Liverpool because they're the team that are way clear and on their way to the title. But really, it's actually much more important because Liverpool are going to be grand financially either way. It's just a bit of glory. It's the clubs that are on the precipice of promotion and relegation and all that entails, and that also involves people's jobs and livelihoods. They're the ones that are that their situation is even more so pressing, and we've seen that in England now where they were looking at stopping ladders 5 and 6, which is like the conference and the level below. But there's a team, I think Barrow, who are on their way to getting promoted to the Football League for the first time since 1972. And if it stops, what happens to them? And for them, like the cost of not making it would be far greater than it would for Liverpool.
You're getting a bit philosophical on this, here, because I mean, Liverpool, for people will say, like my brother, who's been a Liverpool fan all his life and hasn't seen them win the league in so long. For all these Liverpool fans who've never seen them win anything, this is a bit like kind of a long road to a promised land that you weren't sure you were ever going to reach. And now that they're there, just to see Liverpool literally picking up the Premier League trophy in Anfield or wherever, the amount of times all these Liverpool fans saw Man United do it, hated the sight of them doing it, and hoped that one day Liverpool would do it. As much as you say it's only a bit of glory, is this not the whole bloody point of it? That we follow these teams because we want them to win stuff, and to then just take that away from them because it basically we can't finish the season. I think there's a lot more to it than just a little bit of glory, Dan, to be honest.
No. I'm not saying. No,
I think it's about finishing the season. I think your point, Johnny, is you want to finish the season at some stage. But Daniel's point is that
there's 9 games left. I would presume that, like, from a racing perspective, I would imagine in Ireland we will ease back into a behind closed doors situation initially, and I would hope that they'll come up with some situation in Britain where they can do that and maybe run it off very quickly. I know. It's Gary Neville spoke about 9 games in 9 days. I mean, I'm sure that's not going to happen. But if they could run it off very quickly, to me, the suggestion that you would just declare the Premier League null and void this season would be an absolute non-starter. And I would totally just want to finish this season and then look at next season afterwards and then a bridged off season. Because let's be honest, players are getting a break now as well. They're going to have 6 weeks or whatever without any games. So if the manager isn't telling them to take a week or 2 off, he's not doing his job. So I think we can definitely work into an abridged season next season. But for me, there's absolutely no question that the league should just stop.
Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I listen. I accept all those points as fair enough, but like that's okay for now. But like that's and they do have a plan to resume, and they do have a plan still to try and finish the season by June the 30th. And that's going to lead to a very crowded schedule, and it may well be a closed door schedule. And my attitude would be great. I really hope they can get that done. But if that suddenly isn't possible, it just gets complicated. And I don't know what your preference is. Like, I mean, the season really has to be finished for the season to count. Like, all 38 games have to be played by everyone. Like, would you accept that point, Johnny? Like, I mean, that's the thing. Like, they can't be the sort of declared champions because they're ahead. They have to,
absolutely.
Like, all the 38 games have to be played for everyone.
I suppose you could give the clubs the opportunity to, if there were certain dead rubber games, maybe the clubs could agree on a 1-1 draw or something like that. If it absolutely was of no consequence, but yeah, absolutely.
It's a massive relegation battle, though. So like that's the problem. Like, as I said, people are looking at this through the prism of Liverpool, but I think it's the relegation situation.
Absolutely.
That's
and also promotion
complex as
absolutely. And like the championship has been an unbelievable campaign. Obviously, the relegation battle is well up in the air. It's been a disappointing Premier League in many respects, but as you say, Dan, and the Championship has been utterly riveting. There's so much that could still happen, and I think it'll be a tragedy for everything just to be declared like never happened.
Well, I mean, yeah, tragedy wouldn't be the word, but like, you know, there is, yeah. Like, I mean, we're not, like, people are listening to this for a break from whatever, so we're not going to get into predictions of when things may resume. But I do think, like, the authorities are going to reach a point where they have to say, if action doesn't start by this date, whatever that date may be, then they need to lay out a very firm contingency plan. And as I said, like, these clubs, they're all slave to their TV deals. They're all a slave to the TV markets. And the idea of next season being abridged dramatically won't fly with some people. And I mean, this is it comes to a point where, you know, they have to. They can't just keep kicking it on from 2 weeks to 2 weeks to whatever it might be.
But Dan, there's no need for your regular off season here. So basically, the players have had a break. Like, so, what's the best case scenario?
Managers won't be like, you know what managers are like, John. If you're a manager of a team that's close to relegation, you won't be encouraging your players to take that much of a break. You know, you'll be saying, be ready. You can be sure they want to be ready to train as soon as they possibly can. There was even talk during the week of Arsenal returning to training. But as John says, the story keeps moving on with West Ham and other cases popping out. But that's, like, you know, people are almost gasping to get back out training because they're afraid that someone else is going to get an edge over them. So this is an off season in theory, but in practice, I don't think mentally it's going to count as one. I don't think that the players' union will count it as.
Okay, suggestion in here from Endicall. Play the rest of the season from December to September. Play the Euros during or after the Africa Cup of Nations next January, and take March onwards as the end of season break. Basically, void the 2021 season before it starts and start afresh in August 2021. I think we're just having a sporting debate here about fixtures and when this will happen and when that will happen. And I think there's a view out there that we should finish. And it could be the case that we start maybe in October. It could be we just don't know what's going to happen with this global pandemic. Public health is the priority. This is only a game. We're talking about it because we're passionate about it every day of our lives. But it is only a game, football, and it is not. Global health is the key. So I just don't know. April the 3rd is when they're going to meet again in the Premier League. April the 30th is the date they suggested they could come back. That's just not going to happen. They could play it in July. They could play it in October. They could play it in December. And it might be the case that, and Johnny, you've got a fair point about you got to finish the job. But the job must be finished after this whole global health issue is under control. And at the moment, it is not under control. And we just don't know what's going to happen until then.
Yeah, I think in Ireland, and it is only a game, but it's also an awful lot more than that. I mean, there's an awful lot of money riding on it. This is people's employment, and as much as you know, the people's health, obviously, the coronavirus is basically everything at the moment. Industries and all that is going to have to resume at some stage, so that is a concern. But I think, in fairness to our government, and this is something that I think people in football and in sport in general would be very, very conscious of. And I was speaking to horse racing trainers about this. If the horse racing trainer knows exactly what time racing resumes, he'll be able to train his horse accordingly. So if you're training a horse at the moment, but you don't know when he's going to run again, you don't know when racing's on again, you're kind of halfway between training them and not training them. Now, the way the government has dealt with this, to my mind, is that they're doing a staggered approach with the long-term goal in mind. And I think we've a bit more faith maybe here in terms of when sport might resume, because I think we have faith in the way the authorities are leading things. And I think the League of Ireland clubs generally are fairly content with how things are, in the belief that the dates set may be fairly realistic. And I think if we have the next week or two is going to be absolutely key. But if the numbers are fairly in line with projections, I think we can be a lot more bullish about sport resuming at a certain date.